So I'm watching trillions of dollars disappear, and to me, it's a financial coup. We're talking about a coup d'etat. My guess is it's 36 trillion, if not more. We have a governance problem. We are being governed by people who are waging war on us, and we need to face that. Now, if they got 92 million Iranians targeted and tracked, how many people in the Netherlands and the United States do you think they have targeted and tracked? We now are in a situation where AI has gone out of control, and as far as I know, there's no way to put it back in the box. If the people who run the system want Trump out, they can use Epstein to do it. It will work. And they can get him out by the end of the year if they want.
Do you ever fear for your own life then because of everything you do? Hello there, Paul Buitink here for Reinvent Money, a podcast about money and power. I'm delighted to have Catherine Austin Fitts back on the show. She was the Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during the George Bush senior presidency, and she was Managing Director at well-known investment bank Dillon & Read. But for many years now, she left the system and runs her own research firm, Solari Report. Hi, Catherine. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thank you. So we think of ourselves as media, but we do so much in-depth research. I guess it's fair to call us a research firm.
Yeah, I think so. I have the latest here in front of me, and always love reading your stuff. I also always share it with customers. So we're definitely we're going to share to our viewers as well where people can find you. But I saw you on Tucker Carlson the other day. So what's next? Joe Rogan?
I have no idea. You know, I was in Florida, and I have a dear friend who is also a friend of Tucker's. So we went road tripping over to Tucker's, and Tucker has always said his wife is like the most wonderful person in the world, Susie. And so we had dinner the night before, and he's right. She is one of the most wonderful people I've ever met. They both went to the same school, and her dad was the headmaster. So anyway, but I just, I had a blast. And then the next day we went into the studio and recorded, and it was fascinating because, Tucker has been interviewing people for years and years and years. And so his knowledge base is incredible. And we had a lot of fun because we're comparing maps and finding out, where my map supplements his and his map supplements mine. So I had a great time.
You blew him away quite a few times. I read in the comments that a lot of people saw it as his most important interview, even because of some of the things that you mentioned that he was not aware of.
So one of the things I was adamant about is he had to interview Richard Werner, and he just published his interview with Richard Werner. Yeah. And I think that really blew him away.
Yeah. I need to listen to that one. I've had him on my channel a few times as well. And how did it impact you and Solari, that interview?
So I think it was interesting because there's so many people in our network who've always been amazed at why I never get interviewed above a certain view level. And they can't understand how much effort is made to keep me out. Do you know what I mean? So I'll give you an example. I did an interview with a guy in Norway, and he called me and he said, I just got thrown off of YouTube because of your interview. And he said, you don't understand. You're the most boring person I interview. And it's because, what I do is I integrate everything with the financial system. And, because the financial system connects everything, as you know. Yeah. But I try to integrate things in a way that the average person can understand, somebody who's not interested in finance can understand. And, there's a real effort to keep us from connecting the dots. Of course, what people like you and I are trying to do is connect them as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah, and you're not just someone saying all these things because you were part of an administration. You were the first female managing director at Dillon & Read, which was a very important, well-known investment bank. So it's what you're talking about.
So, I never say this, and I don't mean to sound like this, but I'm in Who's Who in America, Who's Who in Finance, Who's Who in Women in the World, or, there's a couple more too, but yeah. The problem is that my credentials are, created and confirmed by the establishment. So they can't say, if I'm not credible, why was I a member of the board at Dillon Read? If I'm not credible, why was I approved in a Senate confirmation after an extensive FBI clearance? if I'm not credible, how did I win 11 years of litigation with the Department of Justice?
Yeah, the list goes on and on.
It goes on and on. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk a bit more about. I mean, last time we spoke was March. It was not even that long ago, but it was that interview was also picked up really well, more than 350,000 times. It was watched, and it also blew my mind in many ways. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the things that we discussed last time, especially also the missing 21 trillion, because you did a research together with an economist and Professor Mark Skidmore in 2017, and you basically looked at the government finances and realized or found out that between 98 and 2015, $21 trillion had gone missing, right? But now we're in 25. So I was wondering, my first question would be, if the amount was 21 trillion 10 years ago, and given the inflation and everything that's going on, how much is that money right now? Do you have any idea?
So let me back up for a second, because I started working with reporters to publish about the money going missing in 2000. Okay. And then coming into 9/11, we were working on a big cover story for Insight Magazine, which goes to all the congressional offices, on the missing money, which at that point was a little bit over $4 trillion. And the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld had a press conference and admitted that there was 2.1 trillion missing from the Pentagon. It's actually 3.3, but, and we thought it was a modified hangout because our story was going to hit Congress offices that Friday. And then, of course, the next day, 9/11 happened, and the debate about the Department of Defense and Department of Housing and Urban Development refusing to produce audited financial statements went away because everybody was so busy. And what was interesting is, if you look at the Patriot Act, it moved a lot of black budget stuff on budget. So a lot of the mess that was being created by trying to come up with secret or covert revenues, it allowed the official budget to do much more secretly. Okay, so there was a shift. Anyway, but I kept publishing about the missing money every year. The missing money is this. And in 2015, the last year of Obama, we had the biggest missing money of any year, 6.5 trillion in 1 year. And I was talking publicly about it. And my concern was that if we didn't fix, basically what you're talking about doing is stealing money from the retirement funds.
But a 6.5 is more than the budget itself, right?
Many times more. Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Oh, well, if you can issue treasuries, including off balance sheet, you can.
Yeah, you can come to a much higher amount even, yeah.
Yeah, you can, anyway, but I'm talking about it publicly, and then a full professor from Michigan State University, Dr. Mark Skidmore, heard me, and he said, she has to be wrong. Now, at that point, including the 6.5 trillion, I had the missing money up to 12 trillion. So he called me, he went to the finances on the Department of Defense and HUD, and realized I was right, that there was 6.5 trillion missing from the Army the year before. Now, remember, that money can be going out or coming in. So, for example, when we went to Iraq, we switched it so the Iraqi oil revenues got deposited in the New York Fed, right? Yeah. So that could be incoming as well. Anyway, so he said, she has to be wrong. He called me and he said, what could I do to help? And I said, okay, you and your students can review all the documents at HUD and DOD from, the money started to go missing in 1998. And that was after the leadership had gotten fed up trying to create fiscal responsibility during the 1995 effort. There was a big blow up and the government shut down for 3 weeks. And I was told by a top pension fund leader, they have given up on the country. They're moving all the money out starting in the fall. And that's when what I call the financial coup started. So Skidmore and his students went through all the financials, and what they discovered was that it wasn't 12 trillion, it was 21 trillion. There were 21 trillions of undocumentable adjustments, and the Department of Defense had refused to obey the laws related to financial management, and then the Treasury as well. So the Treasury and DOD had, okay. So there was a big hullabaloo in Washington for about a year, while the DOD confessed again they were going to refuse to produce audited financial statements. And the culmination of that is extremely important for people who are investing in the markets today, whether it's in gold or stocks or crypto, anything. In 2018, the House, the Senate, the White House under Trump all agreed to adopt a new policy called Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board Statement 56. And what this policy says is essentially the US government can keep secret books.
Yeah.
And
So it got even worse then. So in up until 2015, it was already 21 trillion, and they made it even more difficult for the public to track the money because they give the government even more ways to obfuscate everything.
after 2015, you have no idea what's true. Now, hold on just a second, because now we're talking about the Treasury market. But if you add the national, so we have a big section on Solari where you can get 7 briefing papers on how the federal finances work in the United States. And we also have a paper called Caveat Emptor that describes what this means to institutional investors. So if you go to missingmoney.solari.com, you can find just a wealth of documentation there. But if you add in the national security laws and the classification laws, what this means, Paul, is not only is the finances secret for the 24 covered agencies and the U.S. Treasury, but it's also secret for 150 related government entities. But it also means the large banks and contractors who do business with the federal government, their finances can be secret. So when you look at the large cap stock market in the United States or the bond market, most of which is dependent directly or indirectly on federal flows, there's no financial disclosure. The markets have gone dark. And then when you add to it the amount of money that's now being cycled through private equity instead of the liquid markets, you've basically taken the entire securities and investment world dark.
And despite it being a black box, could you estimate what the amounts would be right now?
So when we announced the 21 trillion, that was as of the end of the financials for 2015. And at that time, the debt was 21 trillion. So it matched the amount of outstanding debt. So I'm going to grossly oversimplify. Imagine for a second, I sell a bond to the pension funds. I sell a $10 bond to the pension funds. I get $10 put in Treasury, and then it goes out the back door, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a straw into the pension funds sucking money out. So my guess is it's 36 trillion, if not more. So the debt's up at 36, approaching 37 trillion. And my guess is you're probably matching the debt.
Right. And then playing devil's advocate here, some critics also, if I ask AI, Grok, for example, say that missing can also be misleading because that doesn't necessarily mean funds were stolen or physically lost. It could also be unsupported adjustments that stem from accounting errors, system incompatibilities, lack of documentation, not necessarily misappropriation. So how do you know the money is actually missing and perhaps it's just some bookkeeping anomalies?
The only way you can prove that's bookkeeping is if you take the bank statements and compare them to the books and see how much was cash. Because if you have 21 trillion of undocumentable adjustments, you can have 50 trillion of missing cash, right? So it can be much larger or much lower because it could be inflows too. The only way you can prove it's bookkeeping is if you have access to the bank statements, which Grok does not have.
Yeah.
Although, given what Doge probably gave them, they may have a lot.
No,
but
perhaps they do, yeah.
But here's the thing. If you were investing in a company that refused from 1998 to 2025 to produce audited financial statements as required by law, and they were reporting huge amounts of money missing, would you, and they said, well, don't worry, you don't need audited financial statements because it's not real money, it's just accounting. We can't, for some reason, the most powerful organization in the world can't figure out how to run its accounts. I mean, here's the thing. I was the person who computerized HUD, or at least the Federal Housing Agency and all the credit and money stuff. And I have very deep experience, both as a government official and then later as a contractor, on how HUD works and how it was computerized. It's impossible that they can't find and know where every penny is.
No, I agree. And it's ridiculous. Also, in the European Union, the Commission is also not able to produce proper reports and accountability of how the money is spent. And these are only two departments you were talking about, right? So if you would research the other departments in the US, you would probably come up with even a larger number.
So we've looked at some of the others where there have been reports of missing money, and we don't see anything significant.
Right.
We think the majority is HUD or DOD. I would point out that many years ago there was a Dutch auditor at NATO who found I think it was 500 million missing, or some huge number
Yeah.
of but they quickly stopped being the NATO auditor.
Yeah, that's how it works. I'm surprised that Mark Skidmore is still working at Michigan State University, given the impact or given the severity of what he found. I can imagine that he would be
here's the
canceled.
thing. He's very thorough, very careful, brilliant, but very conscientious and very hardworking. So he documents things, and he did a lot of public reports with me very seriously. And it was interesting. Right after his study published, and we did just the few early interviews. Suddenly, one Saturday night, the New York Post reported that there was a fire at the New York Fed. Their roof broke out on fire because somebody was using the fireplace in the basement on a Saturday night. So, but here's the thing. Mark used to always ask me, why do you never give up? Why do you keep hammering on this? And I remember sitting in a parking lot in Bolivar, Tennessee. I was on the phone with him on my phone. And I said, Mark, if we don't solve this financially, there's only one way they can balance the books on the retirement accounts, and that's to lower life expectancy. And if you look at, they've been lowering life expectancy since, right after the budget deal broke up. They started to do the FDA approved OxyContin, and they started targeting poor neighborhoods with fentanyl and OxyContin and the pill mills. And I said, but they're going to have to accelerate the lowering of life expectancy if we don't do something. And sure enough, when the pandemic started, one of the reasons I knew it was an op, it had nothing to do with health, was I knew this was how they were going to lower life expectancy. And they had to. If you don't put up the financial assets, you have to take down the liabilities, and you do that by lowering life expectancy.
And the life expectancy has been going down for many years in the US, right? And I don't think in Europe that's the case yet, but
it's shocking. So you have the 19 industrial countries going like this, and then the US, when the financial coup starts to move away, and then you hit the pandemic and it drops off the cliff.
Yeah.
So now it's interesting. We just did another interview with Skidmore, who did then start to look at sort of issues on the pandemic. But one of the things he's shown is that I call it the great poisoning, the deterioration in the health in the U.S. economy or the U.S. population has resulted in explosive healthcare costs for the federal government. And his latest report is if we could go back to 2010 levels of disability, we could drop the HHS budget by $500 billion a year because the disability is exploding. If you look at last year's budget, the HHS, Medicare, Medicaid budget was double the military budget. Now they're trying to get the healthcare budget down, and they're taking the military budget up a fair amount. So,
yeah, and then you also have the black budget, something we discussed as well. According to some estimates, I see that's around 50 to 100 billion, but that's just a part of the whole missing money story, right? It's only a small part, then, I guess.
Right. So think of it this way: you've seen the documentary State of Control.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it explains the background. At the end of World War II, you created this structure, this national security structure, that would allow you to shift technology and money into, so we have the overt government budget, and then we have the covert. And the covert was in several sides, and this was a combination of the National Security Act and the CIA Act, and then subsequent executive orders that helped you basically build this sort of secret pot of money. You had the money that had been seized at the end of World War II. So, to the victor go the spoils. And there was tremendous booty collected up after World War II. And that was sort of what Joseph Farrell calls the sort of secret system of finance. So that was one piece. But then through the National Security Act, you created a construct in appropriations where money could be appropriated, but clawed secretly back into, intelligence agency operations. And that's the black budget. And the first pot, as far as I know, had no oversight from Congress. It had oversight from sort of secret societies, groups like the Masons or the Bilderbergs. But the second pot is under the approval of one of the committees that oversees intelligence operations in the U.S., but the money is secret except to them. But then you have another pot of money that's basically organized crime. You have the intelligence agencies engaging in doing things that are illegal, like narcotics trafficking, that are generating huge amounts of money. And so you have sort of open black budget and closed black budget. So you have these three pots of money. And the other thing you have, which is arguably even worse, more money, is the ability to take technology, the most powerful technology in the world that you're developing with taxpayers' money, and shifting ownership of it into private companies. And that technology is worth trillions and trillions of dollars. And if you read a book like The Day After Roswell, it's the story of taking some of the most secret technology that the government is getting and developing with taxpayers' money, but shifting its ownership into private companies to keep it secret. And then, so this is growing, growing, growing. And as it grows, you literally have, a process globally where more and more organizations are approved to have sovereign immunity from various laws. So the BIS has, with rare exception, complete sovereign immunity. They can keep money on their balance sheet, move it around the world behind secrecy, right? So you're creating over on one side of the economy or one side of the balance sheet a world which is a parallel existence to the official world, right?
Yeah.
So over here, everybody believes we're being operated by a constitution of the basic laws, and there are all these rules and regulations we have to follow over here. While this group over here is going really fast with the world's most dazzling technology, to a certain extent, they're operating without taxes, they're operating without regulations, and they're operating outside the law. So they're going really, really fast, right?
Yeah.
And these guys are going faster and faster, and these guys don't even know the second guys exist, right? So you're bifurcating into, some people, I call it the breakaway civilization, but these guys are literally now creating their own separate civilization.
Yeah, interesting. You also pointed me to a video on the Solari site, a short interview with Amy Benjamin about direct secrecy and indirect secrecy. So how I translate that is sort of to what we are allowed not to know and what we're not allowed not to know. Like some of it is like, oh, you guys, you cannot touch this. This is confidential for state security. And people understand that, okay, this part is secret. I should not read that. But then there's a whole part we don't even know about that secret. That's sort of the indirect secrecy. And that's most of what you're talking about, I think, is indirect secrecy, right?
Right. And the thing that leads you to understand what's going on in that world. So, so I always said the pandemic was the breakaway civilization breaking back in. Saying enough already, let's take over the place. So the way you understand it is by following the money. In other words, when you disappear $21 trillion, that's a lot of money. That can build a lot of stuff. It's funny. I used to, when in the days when we still rented videos, you'd go down to a store called Blockbuster. I don't know if they had Blockbuster in Europe.
Something similar we had here, yeah.
Yeah. And so I walk into Blockbuster in Bolivar, Tennessee one day, and there's the picks on, it's called staff picks. So the people who run the place, they're recommending their favorite. And there's this documentary called, what was it called? I don't know. It was about the UFO in Arizona in 1996. It was a very famous UFO thing. So I thought, okay, well, if the staff recommends it, I'll fall for it. So in this video, what happened was you had a UFO that came down the highway, the side of Arizona, and you had just tens of thousands of citizens filming it, including, doctors and engineers and aerospace engineers and lots of professionals. So you couldn't put it back in the box, and so I remember looking at this huge space constellation floating down, and they had lots of film of it. And I said, I bet Lockheed Martin would build that for $4 trillion.
Yeah,
At that point, I only knew about $4 trillion missing. But anyway, so one of the things I tried to do is all this money was going missing, and I was estimating what's in the hidden system of finance, what's in the black budget, what's in the organized crime part of the black budget. So I'm estimating all these flows because so much of it was part of the mortgage bubble and the mortgage, the financial crisis. So let me give you an example. The TARP Inspector General said that the taxpayer bailouts during the great financial crisis were 23 trillion. The Levy Institute estimated they were 29 trillion. But let's just say
TARP was the Troubled Asset Relief Program, right? Okay.
Yeah, and it had an inspector general. It was an attorney who later wrote a book. So the TARP Inspector General said 23.7 trillion, I think. Levy Institute said 29. But let's just take the 23 trillion. At the time of the bailouts, $7 trillion, $7 or $8 trillion would pay off all the single family mortgages in the United States. Right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of collateral fraud.
Yeah, plunder, pure plunder.
Right.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, all these numbers, right? It's just like trillion here, trillion there. Last time we also talked, and you already mentioned it, that a lot of the money, the missing money, went into building underground bases and this parallel society. And I was doing some research myself. I'm reading this book, Area 51 by Annie Jacobsen.
Yeah, it's very good.
The Manhattan Project. It's interesting to see that 130,000 people worked on the project, while the general public was not aware. Only after the bombing of Hiroshima, the public found out about it. Congress didn't know about it. Only a handful of people. The president didn't know about it. So 130,000 people are able to keep a secret for years.
Right.
But also Area 51, from between 55, when it started, and 89, when Bob Lazar came out, for decades, tens of thousands of people were working on Area 51.
So not only were they working, right? you had flights from Las Vegas down to Area 51 every morning, and from Burbank every morning to fly in the workers. So you're talking about a major, if you look at the number of people commuting from California and Las Vegas, it's enormous.
So it goes to show how long things can be kept secret for a long time by a lot of people.
Right. And part of the reason I wanted you to listen to that Amy Benjamin interview is she was an attorney at the Department of Justice who really studied the legal and regulatory mechanics of how secrecy is engineered. And it's quite extraordinary. Now, so the reason I ended up looking at all of the different, so I'm watching trillions of dollars disappear. And to me, it's a financial coup. We're talking about a coup d'etat. We're not talking about money being stolen. We're talking about a group of people strategically deciding, and you would hear this in the 90s, democracy no longer works. You cannot get the population to make decisions fast enough, change fast enough. You cannot get them to support financially responsible solutions. So you just have to dumb them down and entertain them. And then you have to create, you have to take all the assets out of this system, bring up a new system, take all the assets out, shift them over. And then you can consolidate. Once you've got the money over and your new system is working, then you can consolidate them into the new system. And that's part of what they're trying to do with crypto, is basically bring up a system where all the money can be programmed, right? And then you create what's Whitney Webb and Mark Goodwin called the panopticon, and then you bring everybody over, and that's how you control them.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about the crypto later, but another question with regards to military technology. So clearly in the past, we were, or the US was building really important technology without the public knowing, whether it's the atomic bomb or the U-2 spy plane, or like Lockheed Martin was almost always involved when it comes to new planes. They had this division called Skunk Works, I guess because it stinks so much what they were building there. But so clearly the industry and the government are colluding and building secret things. So surely that's also happening right now. But do you have some hard, tangible evidence that indeed there are these underground bases and this parallel society that you were talking about earlier? Can we assess that?
So here's the thing on the underground bases. They're clearly underground bases because the government's disclosed, and some of them are official and are clearly disclosed. The other thing is you have, because of the trucking operations that go deliver stuff to the underground bases, you have go to YouTube and look at all the different videos of truckers delivering and driving down and showing. So I don't know a lot about the underground bases. The person who I did a very good interview with, Richard Dolan, that's on the Solari report on underground bases. And Richard did an analysis of all the available information on both known and unknown underground bases. And then there was a group from the Washington Post that did a wonderful survey called Top Secret America of the explosion of building after 9/11. And those two are the best sources I've ever seen on sort of this enormous investment in the national security state infrastructure. Anyway, what happened to me was there was a researcher who I didn't trust, who tried very hard to persuade me that a big part of the 21 trillion had gone to the underground bases. I didn't believe it, and I still don't. But I decided with one of the top researchers in our network to sit down and calculate, what was the minimum or maximum that could have gone into the underground bases. Because I believe a lot of it has gone to basically endow a global government. So I think a lot of money is in the offshore and havens, and they're using it as an endowment to basically run a breakaway civilization, if you will. Anyway, but I wanted to do a calculation, and when I was on Wall Street, we used to do things called WAGs. You know what a WAG is?
No?
A wild ass guess.
Okay.
So we sat down and said we took all the different allegations on underground bases or public disclosure on underground bases. And we just did the United States. We took a look at all of the, we went state by state and looked at each city and the state, looked at all the allegations and all the announcements and said, okay, how many underground bases? What's your guess? So we guessed a minimum and maximum, and the goal was to just estimate a minimum and maximum that might have gone into an underground base. Now, one of the things you need to know about an underground base is to build an underground base is one cost. To build it and keep it secret, it's another cost.
Yeah.
Secrecy is very, very expensive to engineer, and if you look at how they did it on the Manhattan Project, you kind of see. So that was the goal of the exercise, and I became convinced that there were a fair amount of underground bases in the United States, but I didn't think it had begun to soak up the 21 trillion. So yeah. The goal of the exercise was for me to prove to myself, do I think it went in, how much went into an endowment? Now, I'll tell you where I think a huge amount went, and that was into the technology. I think the invisible weaponry we have is far beyond anybody's comprehension. And it's controlled and operated by private companies to keep it secret. And it contributes to enormous valuations in the marketplace, both, who owns it, but also how it's applied. Yeah. And it's the secret sauce behind the US dollar.
And I can imagine that back in the Second World War, but also during the Cold War, that a lot of Americans working for these projects felt a strong loyalty towards the government, and of course there was this enemy, or at least in their heads, which also gave them a good reason to keep their oath and remain discreet and not sharing the secret. But nowadays, if you look at most young people, they put everything they know online, they share everything. So I wonder if you can still keep that level of secrecy among so many people in the current day and age compared to Second World War, Cold War?
Well, but you use different tactics now. So now you use mind control technology. Now you've got really high quality entrainment technology. And if I can get everybody on sports and porn and brainwash them while they're on sports and porn, I can get a lot of people, if you bring up an underground base, they say, "Oh, that's just conspiracy," and you can literally create frameworks in people's mind that keep them away from all this stuff. And it's just by working on their subconscious and using high tech to do it. It's very economic.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing is, most people don't, are focused on their responsibilities. So you have a family, you have kids, and you don't have time to go off and get into building a map of how the world works. And that's why our goal at Solari is to help busy people get a good enough map so they don't get tricked. I mean, what I want is, I want you to know the official reality, and I want you to know reality because I don't want you to end up, getting yourself into trouble by, deciding to, when you're camping, to go take a look at that, to go check out that underground base that the trucker tried to, show you on the video.
Yeah, you have to be careful with those things. I remember there was this group of people that wanted to visit Area 51. Of course, they couldn't break through, but then they organized a festival close to one of the few gates where you can sort of try to enter Area 51 by road, and they organized a festival close to the gate of Area 51. Let's talk a bit more about technology and freedom, because you're worried about how companies like Palantir and Musk's companies are implementing a control grid. And even Robert Kennedy, who you previously liked, advocates for people using wearables, which makes it even easier for them to track and monitor us. And I definitely see all those risks too. For that reason, I'm never going to buy a Chinese car or a Tesla for that matter. but what if I become blind and I can never see my kids again, which would be like an awful nightmare scenario. But I have an opportunity to regain eyesight by using Neuralink, one of the other companies by Musk. I would probably take the bait. So I guess my point is, shouldn't we also embrace some of these technologies? Because they can also be marvelous things, of course.
Right. So that's the question. How do you use technology to advance human civilization instead of destroy it? I mean, here's the problem. So do you know Whitney and Mark's concept of panopticon?
Yeah, I would love to interview Whitney one day too, by the way. If
okay. You should
can help
do
me
that.
out with that. That would be amazing.
I will try. But she's busy. She just had another kid. So
yeah.
Anyway, so what I see, unfortunately, is so let's talk about the Iran war. So the Iran war was, we're told, was under planning for 8 to 12 months by the United States, working closely with Israel and the IDF in 8200.
Yeah.
And the war starts by targeting and killing 11 Iranian military leaders and scientists. And doing it, the reports are some were killed in their home. The operation taking the position that it is okay to kill them and their family and some of the neighbors as collateral damage. Okay. So now we have war not as targeting the infrastructure, but war as an individual manhunt.
Yeah.
Where you literally tracking and targeting. Now, reports after that are that 92 million Americans, thanks to Starlink and satellite systems like Starlink, 92 million Iranians have been identified and are being tracked. Right? Because the way you can find those 11 leaders is because you've got 92 million targeted and tracked. Now, if they got 92 million Iranians targeted and tracked, how many people in the Netherlands and the United States do you think they have targeted and tracked?
Yeah, I mean, in Holland, we also use Palantir. Our police force is using Palantir software as well. And I think it was you also reporting about how Israel is using Palantir or Lavender AI software to pinpoint targets, especially at the start of the war with Hamas to eradicate people, right? They're using AI, Palantir software to execute.
Yeah, but they're using it to choose based on probabilities that they're probably a terrorist. And there's only a human check to make sure, I'm told in the reports, that it's a male person, not female.
Yeah.
And but according to the economist, the beauty of the system is that because the software is choosing the targets, the military officer is not legally liable for violations of international
Now that's
crimes.
convenient.
Yeah. So you're basically using AI and software to get around the law.
Yeah.
So but let's go back. If we take the surveillance system and remember this idea of here we have the market economy, and now we're moving everybody over into the panopticon where we can use crypto as programmable money and stablecoins as programmable money. But we also have, the Palantir panopticon. So we've got a continuum for each individual person. Not only do we have them under surveillance, but we can manipulate their money in many different ways to define where they can go or what they can buy. All the way through, we can hit a button and kill them.
Yeah, it's an awful world that we're heading towards. But at the same time, like the example I used earlier, if I could regain eyesight, or let's say I live in a remote area and I don't have internet, but I can use Starlink to get internet. There's all these individual choices that you have to
Right.
make, and they're
Right.
very
Exactly.
difficult to make, I would say.
Well, here's the thing. Technology is not good or bad. It's just a tool. And the question is, how do you use the tool? And who and what do you finance? So I don't think technology is the problem. I think technology is simply a tool. And the question, you don't have a financial problem and you don't have a technological problem. You have a governance problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we would need more open source solutions. Like if you would have, for example, with AI, there's all sorts of open source AI tools that you can use, or maybe something like Neuralink can also be at some point built by other organizations, more decentralized, more open, so you don't have to rely on Musk and his corporate.
Right. But here's the problem. AI is much more dangerous. You name any individual in the world, AI is much more dangerous than Netanyahu.
Yeah,
So we now are in a situation where AI has gone out of control. And as far as I know, there's no way to put it back in the box other than, oh, my monitor just went dead.
it's,
So,
the panopticon is intervening here, Catherine.
yeah. So there's, as far as I know, there's no way to put it back in the box other than turning off all the electricity. So I think the question is, how are we going to guide this? And it's a very big question because it's out of control. And if you look at who's building it right now, they're building it basically with a heavy dose of greed and hubris. And those are the wrong values you want to integrate into AI.
Yeah.
Because once the AI is, at an IQ level of 50,000, what does it need us for? The way it can get more energy is to get rid of all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of time, I think, before we reach artificial human intelligence. And the next step will be artificial superintelligence. And then it could basically decide to do without us. And but that would be then, in the end, it would be Mr. Global shooting himself in the foot then, right? Because
I,
then it would basically take care or it would fight against its own creators and would take over.
so here's the thing. It's inconceivable to me that the breakaways haven't had artificial intelligence for, they never let technology out that they haven't mastered and figured out how they want to handle it long ago. So I think there's a tremendous lag between the covert economy and the overt economy, or the black economy and the open economy. So I think they've had AI for quite a while.
Yeah. Also, the super version of it. It's sort of in a box somewhere, waiting to be released in a cage.
So I don't know if I told you, did I ask you if you had read Dr. Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So this gets back to, what my fundamental analysis financially of where we are. A New Science of Heaven is a study of plasma and what we know about plasma. 99% of the universe is made up of plasma. And Temple's belief, and I think well reasoned, is that plasma is alive and intelligent. So the notion that you're going to digitize all plasma in the universe and control it is a joke.
Yeah, it's hubris. Yeah.
It's total hubris. And so, I feel like we're a group of cavemen who've been given laser guns, and you know, we're having fun with our laser guns and making a complete mess. But we'll see what happens.
We'll see. And then I was also intrigued by the whole fight between Trump and Musk. Most of it seems like theater to me, but at the same time, Musk is now starting his own American party. Is it maybe is it maybe a plan of Musk, Thiel, Palantir, all these guys to, in the end, get rid of Trump and replace him, for example, with Vance, who was already working for Thiel in the past, and maybe they will use the Epstein files to get rid of Trump and then accelerate the control grid?
So I think they put Trump in to get the control grid. And we have at Solari, we have a collection that we update every week of all the things the administration is doing to build the control grid. And I have to tell you, if I had chosen Trump to get the control grid and I was going to grade him on his performance to date, he gets an A+++. He's done a fabulous job. And I can't imagine another politician who could have done this much this fast. So, but if you look at what they've achieved, I don't think they need Trump anymore. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get rid of him, but if they want to get rid of him with Epstein, they can. It will work.
Yeah,
I just don't.
I'm so surprised that, like, to me, it's quite obvious that Trump is on the list because they were besties. But if he's on the list, and he knows, of course, he would be on the list, why was he making Epstein so important during his campaign? Because, of course, that would backfire at some point. It doesn't seem logical for Trump to use Epstein as a trump card in the campaign.
So I don't know if he was using it a lot in the campaign. I think Kash Patel was using it a lot, and I think Dan Bongino was using it a lot.
Well, at least his team was using it, right? So, and also all supporters were vocal about it, and he didn't. He could have stopped it back then already, and now it's too late to get the genie back in the bottle.
So here's who pushed it, and I didn't realize this until recently, because I was very early on in saying QAnon was a hope porn and ridiculous and not to pay any attention to it. But what I didn't understand was QAnon made a very big deal about Epstein and pedophilia and Trump secretly cleaning it all up. And, basically the Democrats were engaged in pedophilia and they were at the heart of Epstein, and Trump was going to secretly clean it all up. So QAnon apparently made a huge deal about Epstein. And that is seriously, in my opinion, and I say this because I know many people trapped in it, it's a cult. It's just a completely adult fairy tale. But they believed it. And so now that he's coming out and saying, oh, it was a hoax, Epstein is a hoax, it flies completely in the face of the cult. So now we've got a really big problem. And I don't know why he didn't put it back in the box. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's too late now, I think, especially since Musk is saying he's on the list. To me, it all seems like a trick to, in the end, get rid of Trump and then continue with Vance, who is already part of the Palantir and Peter Thiel gang anyway.
If the people who run the system want Trump out, they can use Epstein to do it. It will work. And they can get him out by the end of the year if they want. So...
interesting to watch. But so the American party of Tom Musk, are we going to see? Because what's the whole point of this theater for the people in power? Why do they set up this theater?
Musk came into government, told a whole bunch of stories. As he did that, he broke a whole bunch of laws and stole a whole bunch of data, and then he left. So that was just, somebody came in, stole $1 trillion of data, privatized it, violating massive numbers of law, if I'm right. That's my theory. And I mean, Musk is in competition and in the running to be the Antichrist. I mean, What is it about walking in, doing a huge amount of damage, privatizing $1 trillion of government assets, and stealing it to make you and your companies more powerful and rich that you don't understand? Why is Musk an alternative to anything?
No, I agree with you.
I miss the old Italian mafia,
Yeah. They were more honest in a way. Yeah.
They had family values.
Yeah.
They didn't, they might kill you, but they wouldn't kill your family, usually. Right.
Well, Catherine, it's another mind-blowing episode. I mean, you also, of course, have said many times that in the end, the control grid will fail. But after hearing you, it seems damn hard to beat this system or the trajectory it's on.
So
how can we still prevail then?
Here's the hidden strength of the control grid. We're building it. We're financing it. We're supporting it. We're honoring it. We're respecting its leadership. And we have the power to stop doing that. And the reason to see it is not to turn us against technology. We don't want to do that. The reason you need to see it is, we have a governance problem. We are being governed by people who are waging war on us. And we need to face that. So
the omni-war, right? You said
right.
It's the topic of the latest magazine.
The latest Solaris report is David Hughes' brilliant piece on omni-war. But basically, we need to stop supporting people who are killing us. We need to see them for what they are. I mean, one of the reasons I talk so much about the great poisoning in America is, why are you financing companies that are poisoning your children? Stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah.
If millions of people, I'll never forget one person in Washington watching a large protest march, and they turned to me and they said, as long as they have Citibank credit cards in their pocket, I don't care if they walk up and down. Right?
Yeah.
So we are financing this. We are supporting it. We are making it happen, and we have the power to say no. And the whole point of seeing it is and having a good map is, while they're in the process of killing and poisoning this many people, I want you can't duck something unless you can see it. You can't avoid an iceberg unless you can see it and turn in time, right? So that's the goal here, because the more of us who stop supporting it and walk away from it, the less, the more we can use this technology to do things like help people who are blind, as opposed to, poison people so they will be blind.
So you're still positive, right? That we, in the end, will reach critical mass and people opening up their eyes and find solutions outside of the system.
So I'm a huge optimist, because if you look at how the universe works, it's out of control. I mean, the idea that we can digitize everything and control it. I was just looking at we have an investment screen company. So I'm looking at a company at IPO'd a software company that I didn't know anything about. So I went to look at their balance sheet, and they're planning on digitizing the forest. And they got this whole thing on how they're going to, put sensors throughout the Amazon and digitize it's just, you look at this and you think, this is nuts.
This is nuts, yeah.
This is nuts. And I couldn't stop laughing. So I'm a huge optimist, because I understand that where we're going with this won't work. In other words, you can't, you can't control the divine intelligence, right? But at the same time, it's very depressing to watch people march into the abyss. I think I told you this story. I once read a story in the New York Times about a lovely guy who was driving down Connecticut in his BMW, and the bridge that he was about to cross crashed. And it imploded, and he saw it, and he stopped his car, but it was at dusk, and he was African American, and he started to try and wave the cars coming down to stop them.
Right.
And because he was African American, they wouldn't stop, and they kept flying off and to their death. Because
that's karma, then, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they deserve that kind of karma. But anyway, he stood there and he kept trying to wave them down.
Yeah.
And having to watch them go off and crash and die.
Awful story.
Well, it's an awful story, but sometimes that's what our lives feel like. Because, I mean, I know this happens to you at Holland Gold. You're watching people, do things with their money, not doing the smart things with their money, and you just,
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do. But it's the same. It's the same at Solari. We're watching people finance and help the guys who are killing them, and they won't listen.
Now, do you ever fear for your own life then because of everything you do?
No, because I had so many life-threatening incidents happen to me during the litigation. So I litigated with the Department of Justice for 11 years, and I had so many life-threatening moments. I can't tell you how many times I've been sure I was going to be dead in the next 10 seconds. So I could tell you a story after. Sometime we'll go out and have a drink, and I'll tell you all the
Yeah, for
really
sure.
scary stories.
Yeah.
But if you've lived through that, if so these are not technically near death experiences because I didn't leave my body, but I've had many near death experiences. So
Yeah. And here you are, vibrant and full of energy, full of wisdom. That's very admirable.
well, here's the thing, you can't live. We just did an Independent Media Alliance panel, and we were talking about how easy it is to trick people when you put them into fear. In other words, a person who, I can't, you're very hard to trick. I know you well enough to know you're very, very hard to trick. But if I can put you in a state of real panic and fear, then it's much easier to trick you.
Yeah,
And
true.
and and so we were talking about, how that technique works and what to do to prevent it. But I mean, I've been, I don't know, I'm hard to, I don't fall into the fear easily.
No. And you always keep the state of amusement, right? It's important to keep
So
on
this
laughing
this is
and
the
stay
trick.
positive.
It's very hard to, the hardest thing for me to do, and it took me years to learn this. So I have a protective streak. I want to protect people. And so when I see people driving off, and off the cliff, it drives me crazy. I can't. I feel terrible. I feel like I failed to protect them.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that. And it finally took me, I studied spiritual warfare at a really wonderful church. And I learned from that that it was not, I was not under obligation to save them if that was their destiny. And I could do everything I could do, but at that point I had to let it go. And I discovered in scripture, we call it the joy of the Lord. You have to stay in a state of amusement or you can't, it's like the Balo doll that always comes back up. If you can't maintain your state of amusement. And I have to tell you, some of the funniest times we have at Solari, we have a roundup once a week where we all meet because we're all over the world
Yeah.
and we come together. And somebody's, we'll get to somebody and they'll say very quietly, I need help. I've lost my state of amusement.
And then everyone cracks up and it's all good again.
Well, we all try to help them, because it's, what we observe in terms of what's going on in the world. You observe some pretty heartbreaking things.
Dark stuff. Yeah.
So one of my favorite, it's a Dutch guy who's got my favorite channel for dog and cat video and animal videos. And if it wasn't for that channel,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Animals show us the way sometimes, right? Yeah, great to talk to you again, Catherine. And I advise everyone to check out Solari.com for a lot of free research as well. But of course, really good paid research too. And this is, one more time, the latest report that we always get sent to our office. Look forward to seeing you in real life again. So maybe next time we can do it again in Friesland.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Let's do it.
Thanks, Paul. Have
Thanks
a
so
great
much,
day.
Catherine. You too. Take care.